Welcome to FutureFoodCast. We're a community of industry experts, food technologists, and food enthusiasts talking all about the future of food. FutureFoodCast is sponsored by Farm to Plate, the brainchild of Paramount Software Solutions. Farm to Plate is a software company committed to creating tomorrow's food business ecosystem today. And I am very excited about the view that we have coming today, all about the organic food business and a great story within that. We have Jason Freeman with us. He's the founder and CEO of Farmer Direct Organic Foods. Welcome to the podcast, Jason.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I forgot my name. I'm Pam Line-Miller, your host. I'm excited to be, we're interviewing with Jason today, and can't wait to bring you some of that. Jason has such a rich volume of experience in this food space. I can't wait for him to tell us his story a little bit. So Jason, please catch us up. I mean, where did you start in all of this? I mean, you're in a great place right now. Where did you start your journey with organic foods?
Yeah, well, it started back in 1996, 97. And I was working with a trade show and marketing company that was lobbying the Canadian government to legalize industrial hemp. And part of that, we did trade shows and we had conferences. And at the conferences, at the trade shows, there were some organic farmers that were growing industrial hemp. And the Canadian government legalized industrial hemp in 1998. So I approached those farmers and asked them if they would grow organic hemp seed for me, which they did. So I formed a company in 1999. All of our farmers and processors were in Saskatchewan, Canada. So in May of 2000, I moved out to Saskatchewan to be closer to that. And in 2001, I sold that company. And then the farmers that were growing the hemp seed approached me and said, well, we grow lentils, we grow beans, peas, wheat organically. Will you market our product? I said to them, if they formed a cooperative, I would manage their sales, marketing, and logistics for them. So that's how Farmer Direct Co-op was founded in May or August of 2002. So that's where it started.
Yeah, and that was a long time ago. I mean, in the organic food world, it's been around for a while, but to getting the cooperatives together and all of that, I mean, that was pretty much on the front end of some of that work, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I'd say probably the second wave of organic. So we had some farmers that started organic farm, like that we were working with, that started in the 80s and 90s. Okay. And then around 2000, second wave, I'd say, of organic entrepreneurs came into it, started forming brands, and really started to push the organic agenda into retail.
Yeah, I feel like consumers started to get on board later. There was a smaller group, I guess, that first wave that you're talking about, but I remember hearing more about organics, and like I used to order from a local group that it was a farm that was local to me that would source from other organic farmers in the area. And similar to what you're saying, like bringing things together and,
So before, and like ironically, I didn't time it like this, just happened like that. We formed Farmer Direct Co-op in 2002, and that's the same year where the National Organic Program came out in the U.S. So the federal law that defined what certified organic food was. Prior to that, you had about 50 plus different certification bodies across the U.S. and so that was great. It was very grassroots, but there was no national rule. So it impeded market development in a sense, because, retailers weren't necessarily going to, get on board when they had to go through, we're getting it from this certifier and this certifier, and the rules are a little different. But 2002 came along, and so the law became uniform. And that's when organic food really started to take off.
Yeah, and that's key, that whole standardization across the industry, like you were saying. I mean, from an owner perspective or the producer perspective, like you said, companies aren't going to try to meet all these different standards, but when we can get like a federal standard, like you said, came across. So that was probably a game changer, but you were still a co-op at that point. And so bring us up to speed, like what happened during that time?
So in 2002, from 2002 to 2011, our main business was selling, say, truckloads of, say, large green lentils to organic food manufacturers. But when the financial crisis hit in 2008, 2009, commodity markets, whether it was organic or conventional, just got totally turned upside down. Prices just evaporated, markets evaporated. And so we got together with the farmers and said, well, we need to find higher margin markets that are more stable. So that's when we decided to come out with the Farmer Direct Co-op brand. The problem was we had no money, of course, because of the financial crisis. But we figured that, well, what can we do? We can put our lentils and beans and peas and whatnot in 25-pound bags for retailer bulk bins. And so that's what we did. We had no money to do market development, to come up with cereal or, bars or whatever, innovative products. So we just decided to focus on really pantry staples for consumers through the bulk bins. And so what we also decided to do at that point in time to give us more of a marketing edge, and also because we felt it was the right thing to do, is we were looking at a lot of organic goods from the global south, like coffee, sugar, things like that, that were also not just organic, but they're also certified fair trade. No one was doing that in North America or in US and Canada, yet there were real issues with fairness to farmers and fairness to farm labor, even on organic farms. One of the things about the 2002 national rule regulation in the States was that they decided to keep social justice regulations out of it. So, while it focused on production, there was no focus on fairness to farmers or farm workers. So we hooked up with a group called the Agricultural Justice Project, which was controlled and owned by farmers and farm workers. So it was a domestic fair trade standard that was controlled by the very people that it's meant to benefit. So we're like, well, this is a really strong standard. So our 60 farmers went through this process. We got certified. It was a great process too. Farmers learned a lot. A lot of the informal relationships they had with their farm workers became formalized through contracts, which both the farmers and the farm workers after the process said that it was great because they actually had a document they could reference whenever there were issues, and they didn't have that before. So, a lot of good things came out of that. And, so we figured that, we'll sell a few pallets or whatever of this. So we started that in 2011, 2013, Whole Foods Market came calling, and they said, we really love what you guys are doing. And it ended up being about 5 to 7 truckloads of business a month. It was just a huge volume. And so that really took our co-op from insolvency to its solvency, money in the bank. And, so it was great. And how we launched it and like what were our attributes. So consumer facing, we were 100% farmer owned, we were 100% organic, and we were 100% domestic fair trade, something that we called the fair deal. And we found an amazing partner in Whole Foods Market. And just one of the things for entrepreneurs to understand, if you can effectively communicate your attributes to the marketplace, you'll get a lot of support from the retailers. And, what I mean by that is not necessarily like, the head office going, hey, this is great, but literally at the store level. And if people remember those great like Whole Foods Market chalkboards, they had staff making these absolutely beautiful chalkboards saying 100% farmer owned, 100% organic, 100% fair deal is what we called our domestic fair trade regime or our program. And so it really took off.
Can I pause you there for a second? Because I don't want to skim over this point, Jason, that you were doing before the Whole Foods deal came along. It's not like because Whole Foods wanted to work with you, you went after all these standards and doing the right thing by your farmers and your owners and the whole fair trade, fair deal, 100%, 100%, 100%. You were doing that because that was the right thing to do. And I think that's a really important, like good corporate citizen, even though you weren't thinking of yourselves as corporate citizens at that point, you were interfacing with a lot of farms and farmers and making a difference at that level because it was the right thing to do. Like you didn't have any other motivation at that point. And that is part of what allowed you to have this success with Whole Foods. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I explained to people Farmer Direct was the perfect marriage between an organic consumer and organic farmers. Because I wasn't a farmer. I never grew up in a farm. I grew up in an urban center. I didn't step onto a farm until I was 30 years old. But by the time Farmer Direct Co-op came around, I'd been an organic consumer for just under 10 years. And it always bothered me that you'd have brands that were like split. They'd have some organic SKUs and then some conventional SKUs, which they called natural, which still doesn't mean anything. There's no real definition of natural in the marketplace. And so I was like, well, this is wrong. Like, there's got to be latent demand. I'm not the only organic consumer out there who may be frustrated about this. And I found out pretty quickly when we launched that, there was a lot of organic consumers that shared that view. And as time went on too, a lot of organic consumers are getting frustrated because there's an issue with organic integrity. Can you really trust with all the demonstrated organic fraud that's happened with the court cases and the imports? It's not just a theory. There is organic fraud that's been perpetuated. And, it's usually at companies that, they sell organic, they sell natural, they sell conventional. They don't care. It's not an ethical proposition for them. It's a business proposition. So for us, we felt that, if we led with an ethical proposition, we'd get all those like-minded consumers supporting us. Now, let's be very clear about this. There's 350 million people in the US. If there's only 1%, because people tell me people don't care. And I'm like, yeah, but 1% do, maybe 5% do. But if 1% do, that's 3.5 million consumers. If you market effectively, they will find you and they will support you because they're hardcore. And then you can build a business off of that. And I thought to myself too, like, how else can you build a business? Because if you're doing the same thing that everyone else is doing, you're not differentiated. And so you have to compete with them and their larger marketing budgets and whatnot. So we did this and it worked out. It was effective.
Exactly, Jason. You were doing what you needed to do on the front end and hopefully spreading that, the organic food fraud, that's a real thing, but food fraud is a real thing, not just in the organic area. So that is definitely a real situation, a real problem that a lot of manufacturers have and the sourcing of their food. So, we're trying to work on solutions to all of that. And you identifying the farmers that you're working with and having contracts with them and monitoring that, that's making a great step in the right direction to actually be able to justify and prove that you really are producing the organic food. I know you've had some challenges with regulations with organics and what's not organic. I don't want to get in the political realm here, but I know there are people that don't necessarily know food as well that are making policy around organics. And why don't you share a little bit about that and what you see as kind of purely organic food and not organic food?
Yeah. So, you have to have a really realistic expectation about our system. And so it was great when federally the US government came out with the 2002 regulation. But the downside is that now the government controls it. And as things happen, large corporations will lobby Congress to water down that regulation. So, we anticipated that. And that's why we did, we're 100% organic. That's why we will now have full traceability. And that's also why our organization evolved into Regina Organic certification, because, there's a lot of things that are good about the National Organic Program, but a lot of things that are bad about it now. And so, for example, they're allowing hydroponics to be certified organic. Now, the problem with that is that the very basis of organic agriculture, the reason that it exists is to build soil. So when you have soilless agriculture, soil isn't built, obviously. So all the consumers that were trying to support the farmers that were building soil for all kinds of, amazing reasons. When you build soil properly, it provides all sorts of ecosystem services. It cleans the air, it filters the water, it holds more water. So you have less flooding, for example. And the most important thing is it produces nutrient-dense food. When your soil dies, the symbiotic relationship between soil microorganisms and plant roots ceases to exist. And that symbiotic relationship is what transfers the phytamins, so vitamins, and minerals in the soil into the plants.
And that is really one of the key things for you as an organic representative or in the Regen Organic, and we'll put that link out in the notes, certification. You're very much a caretaker of the soil. You very much care about the health of the soil that your plants are grown in.
Yeah, I think it was the UN, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN says we have about 60 harvests left before a lot of the topsoil, around the world is gone.
Okay.
Once the topsoil is gone, you can't produce food anymore. And so it's becoming extremely dire. There's all sorts of things too. If you look at the Mississippi Basin, there used to be in some places 14, 18 feet of topsoil. Because of industrial soil management, industrial agriculture, a lot of that's been wiped away. And where did it end up? It's ended up in the Gulf of Mexico. So I think it's like just huge. Like 1,000 square miles sandbar that wasn't there before. And this has all sorts of, downstream ramifications. One is that the seafood industry is, in a lot of parts been devastated because, what they used to harvest isn't there anymore. And then if you even look at Hurricane Katrina, what happened was that once the hurricane got through Florida, it kind of lost steam. But once it hit that sandbar, okay, so you have very shallow water, which is incredibly warm because it's shallow. All that energy picked up in that hurricane, and then it just slammed into New Orleans. So, how much does that cost, right? What's the human cost of that? What's the economic cost of that? It's almost immeasurable. And this is because we didn't manage our topsoil properly.
Yeah. So the things that you're doing, you're trying to set the pace and affect positive policy and, do the right thing with your farmers so that we can really answer that sustainability call moving forward. We want to be able to provide food and good food to everyone moving forward. So I really like a lot of things you're doing. And obviously Whole Foods does as well, because you're in, I don't know how many of their stores and others, obviously, but it's a great story of doing the right thing and bringing good quality organic foods to the market, which we are clamoring for. We as consumers are interested. We're paying attention. And I think that's all in your favor as well.
Yeah, everything behind Farmer Direct is like what I'm fundamentally trying to do, as a founder of the CEO, is that when a consumer goes to the store and he purchases our product, or he or she purchases our product, they know and they are confident that those grains were produced in a way that builds soil. Okay. It doesn't matter, where it is in US or Canada, which farm it's coming from. Every time you buy a Farmer Direct product, it's building soil. It's part of the solution. So consumers are busy, right? They're getting thousands of marketing messages thrown at them every day. You don't want them to have to be worried about, well, is this brand really saying what they're doing? We're still 100% organic. We're never not going to be 100% organic. And we're elevating that beyond just the NOP to Regen Organic certification. And so actually right now, if you're interested, a lot of people like oatmeal. If you go to Whole Foods Market, bulk bins, and a number of independent retailers in the US, their bulk bins, you can buy your oatmeal, for example, and you can feed your family, something nutritious that you can trust that is part of the solution.
Yeah. And that's really positive. And I think part of your entrepreneurial journey, and maybe it was a little bit of an accidental entrepreneurial journey for you based on your story, like you were going to step in and do the marketing and then the bottom fell out, just the circumstances that happened in the financial crisis. And you had some skills to be able to step in, and honestly, a heart for the farmer and for organics and for service. I mean, that comes through in the decisions that you've made as an entrepreneur, but you're being rewarded for that now with the Farmer Direct Organic Foods brand.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess more of the story is, so I worked, as the general manager at Farmer Direct Co-op till 2016. So I left after 14 years. The reason I left Farmer Direct Co-op is me and the board had disagreement in the direction that the co-op should go. I wanted to continue to focus on the retail and expand that. Farmers wanted me to focus on commodity sales. And, the thing about commodity sales is you have to spend a lot of money on infrastructure. So for example, if you want to sell wheat in an elevator where you have to blend the wheat, if you want to do flour, you need to build a flour mill. These are multi-million-dollar investments nowadays. And so, I said to farmers, let's just wait, let's be patient, let's build our profit, our retained earnings through the higher margin retail sales. Let's really cultivate this because it's working. There's a split between the board, half of them agreed with me, the other half didn't. So, at the end of the day, I said, hey guys, 14 years, this retained earnings, money in the bank, I'm going to leave, so we left on good terms. But unfortunately, by 2018, the farmers got into financial trouble because, what entrepreneurs, if you want to get in the food industry, you need to understand is it's incredibly capital intensive and it's just expensive dealing with the distributors. If you're not on top of it, there's all sorts of chargebacks and fees that, because entrepreneurs are watching this, just as an example, it was this fiscal year. One of our distributors literally took $130,000 from what they were supposed to pay us in fees until we realized that those weren't our fees. Those are fees they were supposed to take from another company.
Oh my
we got
goodness.
the money back, but you'll get it back in 6 months. So my point is there's $130,000 out of your cash flow. There's nothing you can do about it. You just have to wait. Yeah, you have to be diligent. So, it's incredibly capital intensive and, it just got away on the farmers, unfortunately. So in 2018, they came back to me and said, hey, we're in a bit of trouble. We want you to buy the brand from us and, we still keep buying our grain. And I said to them, okay, well, I'll do that. Got together with my business partner, Luke Zigovitz, and we formed Farmer Direct Organic Organic Foods. And we went to marketplace. We salvaged a lot of our relationships. I remember that the first meeting that we had is I flew down to Austin, Whole Foods Market head office, and said, hey guys, can we, salvage this relationship here? And they're like, glad to have you back. And yes. And so we relaunched as Farmer Direct Organic. That's the brand name. And this time the attributes were different. Still 100% organic. Will always be 100% organic again, because there's a real issue in the marketplace as an organic consumer with organic integrity. Again, too many brands playing both sides of the aisle, whether it's conventional, natural, and organic. And so it gets confusing for the consumers. So we're like, no, we're not going to do that. We're focused on being 100% organic. And then, instead of farmer owned, we're like, what do consumers want? If we're not going to be farmer owned, what do they want? They want traceability. They want to make sure that it's actually organic. And so all our products are traceable back to the family farm. So we have that traceability and so right now, everything we purchase is from US or Canadian farmers, but our rule is that anything we grow here, we won't offshore. Okay. That doesn't mean in the future, we won't buy, dates, for example, or coffee or whatnot, because obviously we don't grow that here. So you have to offshore them, but anything we can grow here, we won't offshore. And this is another example where we took an ethical stance when COVID hit and there's all these supply chain issues. It really we were rewarded for that ethical decision. Just another thing about, supply chain issues during COVID, it was a nightmare for a lot of companies. Not only are all our grains and legumes from North Canada, the US, also all our packaging is from the Canada, US. You can get any packaging from China, for example. And, we talked to some people in the industry and their ocean container fees went from $4,500 US to over $20,000. And, we're talking to some of our buyers who are just telling us horror stories about, how they had to eat some of that too, because, if they had their suppliers eat that, their suppliers would have gone bankrupt and they wouldn't have had that supply. So, for all those people that, bring coffee and stuff like that, had no choice, really unfortunate. But, I really stress that if you can find something in North America, I would build that supply chain and strengthen it because, these supply chain disruptions are going to happen again. We don't exactly know when, but they will happen again. And, you're going to be out. It's going to cost you a lot of money. So that, doing the right thing, doing the ethical thing, we're rewarded for that again.
Yeah. And you were rewarded for that because you were able to supply, because you were more locally sourced. You weren't having to depend on that offshore supply chain.
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't have we weren't waiting for like 3, 4, sometimes 6 months to get a part in, or to get packaging, or to get that grain.
Mm-hmm.
So we were able to be a reliable supplier during a time of real stress for the retailers. So, again, that aided us now when we introduce new products. The retailers will really support us in that.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened about 2.5 years ago is Whole Foods Market came to us and said, hey, you guys, you're a reliable supplier, so maybe you can help us out with this. We're now looking for a Regen Organic certified product. Okay, and for your audience that may not be too familiar with what that is, Regen Organic certification was a reaction to the watering down of the National Organic Program, the USDA seal, specifically the addition of hydroponics to it. And so Dr. Bronner's Magic Soaps, Patagonia, the Rodale Institute got together and created this standard called Regen Organic certification, which addressed that, but also addressed some of the things that were left out of the original NOP in 2002. So some of those social justice aspects and animal welfare regulations.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things about Regen Organic certification that we like. It's very much more like the original 2002 standard, which really focused on soil health. Plus, it's adding the social justice and animal welfare aspects to it. So, for example, under ROC, you're not allowed parallel production. So what parallel production is under the NOP, the USDA seal, farm can have conventional land and it can have organic land, and it can grow wheat on both of those lands. So you have the same farm growing conventional wheat and organic wheat. Well, there's all sorts of issues with that, of course, right? Cross-contamination, to outright fraud, right? So mistakes to outright fraud. ROC doesn't allow that. ROC doesn't allow hydroponics and organics. So that when something is Regen Organic certified, it was grown in soil. Yeah. So that's great. Okay. And ROC also has mandatory soil testing. There's no mandatory soil testing in regular organic. And that's really important because we're excited about that too. Over the next few years, we're going to have a really good data set. So we can work with our farmers to show that they're building soil organic matter, for example, so that they're building soil organic carbon, for example, and that they're building soil. Under organics, there's no real requirement to test to verify that you are building soil. So Regen Organic certification there is. And they have some really good regulations regarding animal husbandry to prevent the corporatization or the industrialization of organics, because that's another issue too. The spirit of the NOP was that, you wouldn't have these, industrial organic factory farms, that animals would have access to pasture. Well, when it goes from a spirit to becoming an interpretation, there's a door over there that the animals can see. So, they could choose to walk out of if they wanted to, so you end up having these like massive industrial dairies, for example, in the middle of the Utah desert that have these huge irrigation pivots that are growing the grasses for the animals to eat, for example, and the corn for them to eat versus say, an organic family farm in the Midwest in Wisconsin, that's, a few hundred acres and they're rotationally grazing and, where the consumers think that their milk is coming from. It's not. And the problem is that those farmers that are doing it right, those appropriate scale family farms, have to compete against these industrial farms. And where you really see it hurt them is in all the private label milk with the retailers. So most of the private label organic milk in the US comes from these larger industrial operations because the retailers are so price sensitive. So with ROC, again, as a consumer, if you're drinking milk that's ROC certified, it's coming from appropriate scale farms, family farms that aren't industrialized, that are doing it properly, that don't have like, conventional operation next door. It's just, again, it's what consumers think when they think organic.
Right. And so just taking advantage of the labeling, I mean, that's not helpful. How would I, as a consumer, know, something might say organic on it, but how do I know that it's Regen Organic certified?
So there's a seal.
Okay.
And you can go to it's www.regenorganic.org.
Great.
Yeah, and you can learn all about it. Or
Okay.
just, type in regenerative organic certified, type that into your search and
Sure. Because I know we've got some listeners that are going to be interested in that. And in addition to that, that care of the soil that you were talking about, what does that look like moving into the future? I mean, I love that you're collecting data, because here at FutureFoodCast, we love data. We're all about technology. Our sponsor is all about technology in the supply chain and keeping track of all the data. So we're really focused on that. But as far as the health of the soil and getting the analytics about that and helping your farmers do better, I mean, what are they doing to try to affect positive change, and maintaining the health of the soil?
So a lot of them are doing rotational grazing, for example, which is, you do it properly, and that's the way you build soil. We have one farmer, for example, that he rotationally grazes cattle and grows crops, and he's showing, increased yields, higher quality, and, he's building soil. It's amazing. It's a beautiful farm. That's the way you do it. Some of them are using advanced composting techniques too. There's some really interesting things that are coming out of South America, out of the Amazon, actually. You want me to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I would love that. I think our listeners might be interested as well.
So, we have this bias in our society that somehow, we're at the height of technology, that, everything before us was primitive. And so archaeologists are finding out through something called LADAR, which is laser radar. They're flying over the Amazon rainforest, and they can see beneath the canopy. What they found out is these massive cities, and they estimate that there's a population about 40 million. From what I've read, I tend to think it's actually more, but this is what they've shown. And so people have to understand that's, a massive population. So they obviously had technology to grow food to support that population. What were they doing? And so archaeologists have found out when they've actually gone down into these cities, started like excavating, is that these massive, like 2-3 square mile garden beds, like raised garden beds, that have this incredible soil in it. And they've named this soil terra preta. And essentially what it is, and what some people have done in this day is, we call it, say, biochar, is that the ancients had technology. They realized if they took, wood, and they burnt it down, not all the way, but to its carbon. And then they took all that carbon and they inoculated it with all sorts of things, with manure, with urine, with all sorts of different plant matter. Over a period of about 3 months, this carbon would soak up all of this life. And then they would put it back on the garden beds. And they found that it produced tremendous fertility. So people are doing this in the modern era. They're calling it biochar, and they're having incredible results. So much so, we had one of our farmers that did it on one field as an experiment. He claims that after 5 years of applying this biochar, he was getting better yields than his conventional neighbors on their wheat. And so, that's another very tricky word, yield, because in the modern era, all we seem to care about is, we got like 200 bushels of corn an acre, for example. That corn's nutrient deplete. So if you actually look at yield from minerals and vitamins in the actual grain itself, it's a very, very low yield. But with biochar, you can get similar yields that people are getting with synthetic nitrogen. So, your bushel amounts, but also with corresponding incredible yield and nutrient density. And so we have to look, why are people getting sick in our society? And one of the reasons we're getting sick is because people are nutrient deplete. They don't have enough trace vitamins and minerals in their food, and therefore they don't have enough trace vitamins and minerals in their body. When people don't have enough trace vitamins and minerals in their body, the body doesn't work optimally. Your immune system doesn't work optimally. And when the body's not optimal, it literally gets signals out to the world saying, I am a sick and dying organism. And so that's when you get attacked.
Come attack me. Yeah.
Yeah, by viruses and bacteria, because like, oh, great, this is a dying organism. We need to do our job. We're going to go and we're going to consume that organism. When people are vitamin and nutrient rich, they're stronger, their immune systems are stronger. And so the viruses and bacteria, which, would attack a weak organism, doesn't affect them as much. You have the mechanisms in your body to fight this off. You're giving a signal to the world, the outside world, that you're strong, you're vital, you're healthy.
Yes.
And there's a lot that's been like, this, it's not mainstream science, but it's been scientifically shown to be correct. And so, but it also doesn't really fit into the pharmaceutical paradigm because
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but here's what I'm hearing from you, Jason, is that we are looking at some of the wrong things. We are paying attention when we think about a farmer as being successful, and maximizing their yield. We think about the quantity is the only thing to measure in that. But what I'm hearing from you is that's not the only thing to measure in that. Really, it's the quantity, but also the quality. Like, what is the nutritional content of that product, whether it be corn or wheat or whatever, or legume, whatever it is they're producing. That really needs to be a data point that or there'd be more than one data point, obviously, but the nutritional piece of that is really, maybe more important than just the quantity.
Absolutely. Well, the quality of the food that you're eating, why do kids not like their vegetables? Because quite frankly, they taste like garbage.
Yeah, I think it's well known in society that the nutritional content of our food is not what it was 50, 60 years ago, or even longer. And that is part of the problem. That is part of why consumers have turned to organics, because they want to get the best quality food that they can. And they know that organics, as you've stated today, are taking better care of the soil and have a focus on that. And, that's something that we definitely want. So genius, to go back to the Amazon methods of, infusing the bio product that we're already producing and infusing that with nutritional quality to then put back into the soil that then helps the quality of our yield and the nutrition that's in there. Because we do need to rebuild, especially after this pandemic. People are more focused on immunity and the strength of their body to fight off things that come across their path now more than ever, I think.
Well, absolutely. I say that, cascading positive effects of organic agriculture when it's done properly is, you have ecosystem services from the healthy soil. The soil retains more water, so you have less flooding, you have less runoff. The food's more nutrient dense, so people are healthier. And then you have the cascading negative effects of conventional agriculture, right? Where you have all these disease states, where you have soil erosion, where you have bad air quality, and where you have like the erosion of rural economies too. America and Canada have lost so many farmers. So many family farms, which really were the backbone of that rural economy. Talking to our farmers, a lot of them are, 50, 60 years old. They tell me that, when they're younger, in their 20s, there are barn dances, there are curling bond spiels. There was, baseball tournaments during the summer. There was culture. Now you see a lot of the rural areas being hollowed out. Mm-hmm. The farms have gotten so big that we're doing ridiculous things like desiccating. I don't know if your audience is aware of this, but desiccation is a real issue. And so what is desiccation? Farms have gotten so big that they can't farm by the weather. They can't wait for the first frost before the stalks of the plants get brittle, for example, so they can go in and harvest it. What they have to do is they go in there and they usually spray with Roundup to kill the crop so that they can go in and harvest that. That's direct application of a herbicide on the crop that people are eating. as
Yeah.
opposed to where the herbicides were used when the plant is vegetating to compete against the weeds, but you didn't use much herbicide when the crop was actually flowering and setting seed because you'd already dealt with your weed issue before with the herbicides. Now they're using these herbicides just before you're about to harvest and eat the crop, right? And there's supposedly rules, but people aren't necessarily following them, of course, because they don't, the farmers are under economic gun, right? So they have to do what they have to do. And all sorts of issues too with the nitrogen fertilizer in that market. This year, for example, for nitrogen fertilizer, the cost went up 4 times.
Wow.
4 times. So there's, and the farmers complain about marketplace manipulation. Of course, the agencies that are supposed to regulate that don't, right? You have a revolving door between the USDA and the corporations, between the FDA and the corporations.
Well, I know, Jason, it is absolutely not a perfect system. And I'm excited that there are people like Farmer Direct, Organic Foods that are, doing the right thing and kind of leading the way. And you're not alone. I mean, I've talked to others who are really caring about what's going on with our soil. So I hope that, consumer sentiment and how we vote with our pocketbook, essentially what kind of foods we want by what kind of foods we're buying, can hopefully turn the tide in the right direction. But I think there's a lot of movement out there, and I really appreciate you bringing that to the forefront. And we have covered some really great topics today, but I do want to give you the opportunity, if there's anything you'd like to share with our audience that we haven't touched on that has to do with entrepreneurship, organic foods, whatever you might want to share before we sign off today.
Yeah, I don't know of any successful entrepreneur where it's been a straight and easy path.
Okay.
When I get into it, you're going to experience, your own special flavor of adversity. So you really have to be committed to it beyond just, I want to make money. There has to be like an ethical underpinning that drives you. And I would really recommend too, and, this may be, a little bit strange, but, off topic, but I'd encourage any entrepreneur, anybody, even just in your own daily life, if you're not an entrepreneur, but definitely if you're an entrepreneur, because you're going to be dealing with a tremendous amount of stress, you need to develop a spiritual practice. And what I mean by that is you need to meditate daily, qigong, however you want to define it. You need to do something to transmute that stress. If you don't transmute that stress, it is going to pile up in your internal organs, and it's going to manifest itself in some crazy health crisis. Okay, a cancer, heart disease, whatever it is, kidney failure, whatever it is. If you don't transmute that stress, if you don't find a way to basically really be conscious of that and meditate so it doesn't pile up, get those energy blockages moving, they're going to pile up and you're going to get hurt. So that may be off topic. It's very personal for me too. So I just really recommend that, be in touch with yourself and your body. Just don't let the stress pile up.
Well, I think I really appreciate you speaking from your wisdom, Jason, because you've walked the walk and you've been in those stressful situations, and you know what it is to be an entrepreneur and a business owner and dealing with the stresses of the decisions that you need to make. And so I really appreciate you sharing that personal side as maybe a little bit of a witness to all of us, that as we deal with the stresses in our lives, that we need to be really paying attention to the personal side. So thank you very much for that. And also thank you to our sponsor, the Farm to Plate. Again, they're enabling better food supply chain management. And you can find out more about them at farmtoplate.io. Thanks again, Jason, for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. It was great.
Thanks for listening to FutureFoodCast. FutureFoodCast is powered by Farm to Plate, the leading food blockchain platform. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date with the very latest innovations in the food industry.